What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brew's Show Room version 1.0 deck list of the Commander in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. As always, the deck list is going to be down in the description below for y'all, as well as I would appreciate if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, do all that good YouTube stuff. We're knocking another one of the Flipwalkers from On Horizons 3 off the list. Today we're talking about Grist, Voracious, Larva, and the backside Grist, the Plague Swarm. This is a Golgari graveyard deck, really built to do a couple things. One, take advantage of things going in and out of our graveyard for a various amount of effects. Two, really take advantage of two of the three abilities on Grist's backside. The first is creating an insect and then milling cards and putting a death touch counter on them if a black card was milled, kind of making an army of 1/1 insects that have death touch. That way we can block our opponents and be a really dangerous person to attack. But also, loading up our graveyard so that when we -6 Grist on the backside, we basically get a copy of a bunch of really awesome creatures that are 1/1 insects to just take advantage of a lot of value. We have a lot of ways to get our stuffs back or with added value, and really just going to kind of try to take advantage of our graveyard. Now, it's always worth mentioning when we talk about graveyard decks that graveyard hate can be especially potent, things like Bajuka Bog and things like that. So you have to understand that when you walk into a deck like this, your game plan and your fun is going to be heavily dependent on how much of that your playgroup plays or how many of that the normal opponents you play with on a regular basis play. If your friends play a lot of graveyard hate, maybe this isn't the deck that you want to play there, but Ned, this is say let's go in. Grist Voracious Larva is a 1 green mana 1/2 insect that has death touch, and whenever it or another creature ETBs into your control, if it entered from the graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, we can pay green. If so, we flip Grist. So kind of a fun idea for it. At minimum, it's just a 1/2 with death touch, but if we can get it back, and we can always put it in the graveyard and get it back out of our graveyard that way, or have something come back out and pay, and we flip it. On the backside, Grist +1 says we could put a 1/1 black green insect creature token out of the battlefield, then mill 2, put a death touch counter on it. If we mill a black card this way, -2 can take care of a pesky artifact or enchantment, and then that -6 that we talked about for each creature card in our graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1 green, black and green insect. I like that ability because it allows us to keep getting copies of these really important creatures, especially if our opponents can remove them, and just getting more, build up to a turn where we want a -6 Grist and then, get all of the cards. But let's get into talking about self-mill. How are we going to self-mill ourselves? Well, we can use the original Grist, the 100-tide, as long as it isn't on the battlefield. It's a 1/1 insect creature, just shows other types. The +1 makes an insect, then mills a card. If an insect was milled this way, you put a loyalty counter and repeat the process. We're not playing a ton of insects in the deck, so this isn't a deck, so it's not going to go super infinite. -2 to sack a creature when we do destroy a target creature or planeswalker works really great, right? With all these insect tokens laying around. And then -5, each opponent loses life equal to the number of creature cards in our graveyard. So old Grist works really well with our new Grist, and we definitely want to see them together if we can. Skull Prophet. We can tap that a black or green, or tap to put the top 2 cards of our library into the graveyard. I want to mention really quickly, the good thing about Grist is because it's a 1/1 in its other types in the graveyard, it makes it really easy to reanimate if we want to make sure we can get it back and get it available to us. Stitcher Supplier, whenever it ETBs or dies, we mill 3, so a good way to just get some cards into our graveyard. Sir Conrad the Grim, whenever another creature dies, our creature is put into our graveyard from anywhere. Sir Grim deals 1 to each opponent, or Sir Conrad deals 1 to each opponent, and for 1 in the black, each player mills a card. Just a good way to kind of pay off us milling ourselves and taking advantage of some value. Breach the Multiverse for a little bit of a finisher. Each player mills 10, and for each player, you choose a creature or planeswalker and put them on the battlefield under our control. Great type of ability, can load our own graveyard and steal our opponent's stuff. Life from the Loam kind of gets into the fun dredge plan that we can play in a deck like this. Instead of drawing Life from the Loams in our graveyard, we can mill 3 and bring Life from the Loam back to our hand, and then play it to return up to 3 lands from our graveyard to our hand. Life from the Loam's a great engine. Getting the lands we would get back and milling more things to our graveyard and setting up more value for that type of game plan. We have a fun pair of enchantments that fit really well with our insect side of the plan in Crawling Infestation and Crawling Sensation. Both the start of our upkeep, we're going to mill 2 cards if we want to. Most time we will, though. And then whenever one of our creature cards for Infestation are milled, we make a 1/1 insect. And Crawling Sensation says whenever one or more land cards are put into a graveyard from anywhere for the first time each turn, create an insect. So the cool part is we don't have to mill, but every turn, whenever we're milling, we could potentially get more insects. And that's always helpful for having more bodies to help deal with our opponents. And then Dakmor Salvage can help us with that dredge plan as well. It ain't a bad thing to mill, because we can always get it back and mill some more. We don't have as many ways in the deck like you would with like Gitrog, for example, to really take advantage of cards like Dakmor Salvage, but I think it's enough to help us continue to mill along our game plan. Well, how are we going to get things back? It's not just reanimation. There's a lot of ways to get things back. We have things like Nissa Shadowed Burrows. Whenever a land comes in, you put a loyalty counter on it, and then it's -5 can put a creature card with converted mana cost less or equal to the number of lands you control onto the battlefield from your hand or graveyard with 2+1/+1 counters. Here's a nice way to be getting things back from our graveyard. Archpriest of Shadows can back up a creature to bring a creature back from our graveyard to the battlefield, or do it itself anytime it hits, which is great because it's a 4/4 with Death Touch, so it may not want to be blocked depending on what situations we have in the battlefield. We have things like Bloodcast. Whenever a land comes in, we can return Bloodcast from our graveyard to the battlefield. So if we have abilities where we need to sacrifice things to draw cards or create mana and do things like that, Bloodcast is a great card for that. Same thing with something like Ebon Death, Draco Lich. We can cast it from our graveyard if a creature not named Ebon Death died this turn. So it's a good way to we can get it back if we need to. By something else dying, and that could be great for different of these types of effects. Marin of Clan Nel Toth is a great way to be getting things back every turn. So whenever another creature we control dies, we get that experience counter. And at the beginning of our end step, we can choose a creature in our graveyard. If its mana value is less than or equal to the number of experience counters we control, we can just bring it back to the battlefield. Otherwise, we put it into our hand. This is interesting because obviously we want to be bringing things back to the graveyard, but if we don't want it in the graveyard, we really want it in our hand, we can actually get it back to our hand and be able to use it for more things. These type of effects pair really well with things like Six, which can mill when it attacks and put a land card from them back into our hand. But the big ability is, as long as it's our turn, non-land permanents in our graveyard have retrace, so we can pitch a land as an addition to their cost to cast them from the graveyard. This is great with things like Life from the Loam, because it means we can make a good loop where we can play things back out of our graveyard if that's what we need to do. Of course, we're playing things like Persist and Dread Return to just straight reanimate something out of our graveyard. Living Death is that fun effect where we can exile all creatures from all graveyards and then sack all creatures and put all creatures that were exiled back onto the battlefield under everybody's control. This would be a fun way to take real advantage of Grist's -6, because we can effectively have a board while kind of still having them in our graveyard, and then Living Death just to take real advantage of that big stockpile of creatures we have laying in the graveyard. Reanimate and Victimize, again, more reanimation, more ways to get our creatures back. Squirming Emergence is kind of cool. Return to the battlefield, target non-land permanent in your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the number of permanents in your graveyard. So if we have a lot of permanents in our graveyard, we can bring the right thing back if somebody destroys it, or if we just mill a really important thing, we can get it back with Skirming Emergence. We have a couple more of the, return permanents to your hand type cards, but a lot of this excavation's based around creatures because the creatures are the more important effects as far as this deck goes. And then we want to talk really quickly about insects, only because we do have two insect lords that we're playing in the deck that are pretty important. The first is Amzu Swarm's Hunger, so flying and menace. All other insects have menace. And whenever a card leave our graveyard, we make a 1/1 insect, then put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the greatest mana value among those cards. Do this only once each turn, so we can get pretty big insects coming back as we take things back out of our graveyard. And then Zask says we can play lands and cast insect spells from our graveyard. This works great with Old Grist. Not our commander, but the other Grist, because we could keep playing it back out of the graveyard. Whenever their insect dies, you can put it on the bottom of its own library and then mill 2 cards. So a good way to just keep milling, and then we can buff an insect. So just, again, great ways to kind of play things back out of our graveyard, take advantage of things leaving our graveyard, and overall everything that Grist is trying to do. There's a few more finishers than that, but I think really the goal is to interact with our graveyard, take advantage of our graveyard, and use it to push our deck forward. But I've said it on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my version 1 shot at this deck, and there's a lot of cards that I really wanted to fit in, but I just couldn't find a spot for. And these 3 were kind of the top of that list. Lich Knight's Conquest is a sorcery that says you could sack any number of artifacts, enchantments, or tokens and return that many creature cards from our graveyard to the battlefield. This feels like another way, like Living Death, to take real advantage of us mainly having a board full of insect tokens and a graveyard full of creature cards. If you play the deck and you notice that more often than not you want mass graveyard recursion instead of single target recursion, then I think Lich Knight's Conquest comes in pretty handily. Noxious Revival can get a card from your graveyard on top of its library, which is pretty great. Well, I was thinking to get anything back at any time. It can be paid with 2 life is pretty great as well if we don't have that green mana handy. And then Tortured Existence lets us choose and discard a creature card to return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand, kind of making sure that, one, we always have a trigger for something like Sir Conrad if we want to do that. But 2, keeping these insect tokens being made by certain abilities, or just getting the right creatures into our graveyard that maybe we want to reanimate or use for some abilities. I like a card like it, but again, we got to make sure that's the way we want the deck to go, or that's what we see from our deck to really know if that's what we want to see playing every time. Let's get into our playtest. Keeping a 3-lander, 2 forests, and a Phyrexian Tower. We see Persist, Putrefy, Vraska, Betrayal's Sting, and Sakura Tribe-Elder. A Sakura Tribe-Elder is going to be great with that Persist to try to flip Grist. So this is not a bad hand, especially if we want to get Grist down quickly, which we do. I think we almost always want to get these flip Planeswalkers down as soon as they can. Right now, Grist is just going to be a 1-2 with Death Touch, but I don't think we mind. It's a little attacker, and we could chip some commander damage in. Not that it matters too much, but we'll pay 2 mana and cast that Sakura Tribe-Elder, and I would probably say we might as well just go, crack it on somebody else's turn. I think the good thing here would be we could just persist it back, and if next turn, and if we do, we could pay the green and flip Grist, or we could wait, see what other options we have before we persist it back. But I kind of like that. We don't have any black sources right now except that Phyrexian Tower. So I like the idea of going and getting a swamp here and getting it into play during one of our opponent's turns. That way now we have access to just more of our mana. Turn 3 with 4 mana. I mean, Warren Soul Trader is great, being able to sack things to get treasures. We could, persist back Sakura Tribe-Elder and flip Grist here if we wanted to. The only bad part is we wouldn't get to sacrifice Sakura Tribe-Elder again. We would be basically just paying 3 mana to flip Grist. So that's kind of the weird part here. I guess we could play the Soul Trader and wait a turn, or we could play the Persist and flip Grist. For the purpose of this, let's try that. Play the Persist and flip. Let's go ahead and flip Grist over. Sakura Tribe-Elder would just immediately die to that -1/-1 counter. But now we have Grist on the backside, 1 green mana left. I would go ahead and tick up Grist to create a 1/1 insect. And then mill 2, we mill a Resembling Skeleton and a Pitiless Plunderer. And that is a black card, so we do get to put a Death Touch counter on it, which is pretty great. Now we have a great blocker. Again, next turn we can do that again, or get rid of a pesky artifact or enchantment. Nothing left to do here this turn. Turn 4, would love to start getting our way towards more mana, but we do see we have a Pitiless Plunderer and a Reassembling Skeleton now. Fiend Artisan is a great card that can sacrifice creatures to go get something and put it onto the battlefield by paying mana. We have the Squirming Emergence, which right now we have 3 permanents, so we could actually get Reassembling Skeleton or Sakura Tribe-Elder back right now with Squirming Emergence if we wanted to. So we could this turn Emergence the Sakura Tribe-Elder back, sack it, get another land, and then tick up Grist as a way to just ramp this turn. But do that, or we could do that and set up sacrificing the insect to like Phyrexian Tower to be able to cast Vraska next turn or something, and Vraska can start proliferating, making it and Grist a little bit bigger. I kind of like that game plan. So I would Squirming the Sakura Tribe-Elder back. And then this turn we would go ahead and Tick Grist up, revealing Tainted Wood and Sir Conrad. So that insect that we make, again, is going to have a Death Touch counter on it. And like I said, before my before my last opponent's end step, before ours, in case we didn't need to use Sakura Tribal to the block, we could always use it to block and then sacrifice itself to go get something. But I would just go get another Swamp. So now this turn, we can sack one of these insects to play maybe Vraska if we want to. I think we have a great line here as far as what we want to do. We'll draw for turn. Nissa's a great one here, because now we can start reanimating things with her -5. Unfortunately, 10 mana for both Vraska and Nissa. 9 mana for both of them if we want to use the completed there to get her down with a little bit less. But that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Only 6 mana total, so I don't think we can do that. I kind of like the idea of just sacking one of the insects to the Phyrexian Tower to play Vraska, coming in with 6 loyalty. Now, what we could do here if we really want to is proliferate with Vraska and then do the -6 on Grist. But I think it makes more sense just to do the -2 or the +1 on Grist. We do reveal a black card and Skull Prophet, so that insect is going to come in with a counter on it, a Death Touch counter on it. And again, these just make great blockers if we don't use them for something else. Then I would 0 Vraska, which is going to add a loyalty counter to each of these, draws a card, and actually, fun enough, add a second Death Touch counter if we wanted to the insects. That leaves us a land for turn we can play. So just 1 green mana for turn, but hey, no worries. This sets up a ultimate for Grist now if we want to do that. This sets up a getting on the way towards Vraska's ultimate, and now next turn, maybe we look to play something like Fiend Arson, so we can set it up to start searching out creatures. Nissa can start getting individual things back, even with Grist being an ultimate stage. I kind of like this. Dread Return for some reanimation. Warren Soul Trader can sack our insect tokens for treasure tokens for some extra mana. I think we have a great kind of board state here, and it would just be taking this and pushing it towards some more value that way. Let's get into play test 2. A 5-lander with Warren Soul Trader and Abrupt Decay. Not a bad one. I think turn 1... I think I might as well... I guess the argument could be turn 1 or turn 2 Grist here. We'll just go turn 1. I doubt turn 2 is going to change our mind at all. I'll just play the tap land in. Grist can try to hit somebody for 1, maybe. If we can. Turn 3, we can play the Haywire Might, and we actually could leave up the mana to sacrifice it. We could also play the Soul Trader if we want to. I kind of like the idea of the Might in leaving up Abrupt Decay, and then, that way we have 2 ways to kind of get rid of a permanent if need be, just to keep some interaction maybe open for our opponents. Turn 4, I love the idea of getting Nissa down. Ebon Death wouldn't be bad to get down either. Grapple from the Past could put something into our graveyard maybe we want to get back. I think there's a lot of plays that we could go as far as that goes this turn. I think I'd probably float a black with this, play the Rot Farm for turns. We've got 3 mana at our disposal. And then I guess I'll grapple. Mill 3 and return a creature or a land from our graveyard to our hand. Pef Infestation, Necro Blossom Snarl. I guess we'll pick that one. Forest and Pest Infestation. I was kind of hoping to hit something we could get back out of the graveyard, but that's okay. Haywire Might still up at this point, I believe. Would still be up for its ability in case we wanted to get rid of something. Snarl revealing that Swamp in our hands. Now we've got 5 mana this turn. I guess we could have ideally maybe put down Nissa first and then played the Snarl, getting the extra loyalty counter on Nissa. And then, use her +1 to untap one of our lands, make it a 3/3 with Menace. So we'd have 2 mana this turn. Again, maybe just leaving the Abrupt Decay up or the Haymite ability up. we're just trying to work our way towards getting something back. Maybe like something with Dread Return, we could get the Haywire Might back. You know, maybe this cycle we just get rid of the Haywire Might to get rid of something, and now this turn we could Dread Return the Might back and flip over Grist. That would allow us to do that. Then playing our land for turn, get Nissa up. So now we could minus her. We have 6 lands. We could now be in play to get something good back from our graveyard. Maybe something like Ebon Death. Maybe if we can, discard it. We would go ahead and make that insect token with Grist, Milling, Pitiless Plunderer, and a Soul Rings. That is going to put the counter on that for the Death Touch. Great, we see the Pitiless Plunderer because we could get it back with Nissa if we wanted to. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've just got double black left there, or I guess we could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Leave Abrupt Decay mana up just in case one of our opponents want to do that. I think probably this turn we just +1 one of the lands. Keep Nissa for a later turn where maybe we find something better. We'll go another turn here. Takanuma in to get the landfall. Bloodghast is a great one to keep getting back from the graveyard if we need some for abilities. Soul Trader would be good to sacrifice something to get a treasure if need be. Ebon Death's a great play. I like the idea of probably before we choosing to do anything, do Grist, Forest, and Old Rutstein, making another insect with another counter on it. Rutstein's not a bad one to potentially think about reanimating. Whenever ADTBs at the beginning or upkeep, mill a card. If it's a land, make a treasure. If it's a creature, make an insect. If it's a non-creature, non-land, make a blood. So it can kind of get us different amounts of value. I think I'd probably just like Ebon Death and Warren Soul Trader here. Soul Trader can sack one of our insects for a token if we want to like block with it, or something like that. Again, I don't know that I'm all there yet on reanimating Pitiless Plunderer with like Nissa's ability yet. Maybe we wait for a big turn where we can get Pitiless Blackout with the Warren Soul Trader, sack these for mana, or sack these for 2 treasures apiece instead of 1, and maybe we can push towards a big play. We could always just wait till we could minus Grist when we have more creatures in our graveyard. Again, I think right now what we're going to find with a deck like this is you just got to find enough value pieces to stick together to kind of push for a fun board state and push towards a game win. But let me know, what do you think of Grist down in the comment section below? I think this one's definitely interesting for sure. I don't know how many people build this over the original Grist and how they feel about it. I think this deck's probably a little bit less insect-based, whereas the original Grist probably definitely had a lot more insects in the 99. But I'd love what you hear, what you guys think down in the comments below. I'd love to talk with you about the deck, and I will catch you guys next time.